So I just finished The Walking Dead, and I kind of want to get my thoughts on this because The Walking Dead was my favorite show for a very, very long time. I'd say when I first watched it, like 3 years ago, yeah, it definitely was my favorite show because it has some of the best TV moments I've ever seen. There's a lot of great shows like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, but The Walking Dead definitely is something special for me. And it was the first show that I watched from beginning to end. It kind of means a lot to me. And yesterday I finished The Walking Dead season 11. Without saying anything about spoilers yet, I'm not very happy with how it ended. I think there could be a lot more to the end. So to discuss this show, I kind of want to get into a lot of detail, or not a lot of detail, but I can't really do it without spoilers. So yeah, this is gonna be a spoiler-filled review of The Walking Dead, I guess. Season 1. Season 1 started very promising. It was when Greg Nicotero, I think, still was the showrunner of the show. I think season 1 is an interesting season to look at in the grand picture of the show because it was so different. Just 6 episodes, very sci-fi oriented. It was very new, very polarizing. I think the first shot of the whole show was killing a kid who is a zombie, which is such a bold decision. But yeah, I think the first season is definitely great. It has some of the not best moments, I guess. But yeah, I think season 1 is a very, very good season of The Walking Dead. It introduced a lot of different things, like dealing with death in a situation like this. It also introduced the zombie apocalypse in an interesting way, because in my opinion, if there is ever a zombie apocalypse, The Walking Dead would be the way it is, because the Walking Dead just seems the most realistic to me. Also in the way that they portrayed like the first episode when it all started with Rick discovering the zombie apocalypse. I think that's such a great episode, and I think they did such a great job with how they portrayed the apocalypse of zombies in The Walking Dead. But in the first season they kind of did it differently because Greg Nicotero had a lot of different ideas to how the show was going to be. And that's, for example, why they had zombies using stones to try to break glass, or why they had, zombies coming back to places that they knew as a human. Like, those are some ideas that are more sci-fi oriented. Everything that comes after season 1 is much more grounded. I think the way they portrayed the zombie apocalypse in The Walking Dead is the most realistic way to portray it. Like, if that would actually happen, it would happen like it happened in The Walking Dead. It's a very interesting perspective, but they kind of threw it away when they fired Greg Nicotero from the show, which is kind of sad because it's an interesting thought to see how the show would have evolved if he was still involved with it. But yeah, and the season introduced a lot of new ideas, like, for example, Jim's character. He is bit, and there's like a whole episode, I think, dealing with him having a zombie bite. And I think that's like a very, very good episode because it's the first time these people really get into contact with the fact that this can happen. Instantly after the zombie apocalypse has started, we see groups of people kind of trying to get together, kind of sticking together to survive, like the nursing home, or our main group. And it's like pretty interesting to see the beginnings of how the world would change after the zombie apocalypse, which I really like. I think season 1 is a great season, but I'm kind of glad that we moved away from the sci-fi oriented way of looking at the apocalypse in season 1, because season 2 is one of my favorite seasons of the whole show, easily. Season 2 is less about what caused the apocalypse, and it's more about drama. The whole season is more than double as long as the first season. Not much happens, to be honest, but it's still always interesting to watch because there's a lot of going on with the characters in this season, more than is happening with the plot. And like I said, the dilemma of should we kill Randall is an interesting idea. The dilemma of should we still look for Sophia, or should we just leave it be and accept that she's dead, until the final reveal in episode 7 shows that she's actually just dead. Also the dilemma of people trying to grab onto the fact that they still want to believe people can be cured and are not just dead, which is something that I kind of wouldn't have thought of, but it's obvious. Like, people, especially like probably religious people, who want to believe that their people have not died, that they are just sick. They kind of want to still believe that they can cure their own families and friends, and that's like such an interesting idea. And I think one of the greatest aspects of season 2 is just Shane's downfall. It also happened in season 1, but in season 2 it's even more important now to the story. Shane is one of the greatest characters in the whole show, and just his complete downfall from thinking his friend is dead, his best friend Rick is dead, to seeing him again and then just breaking because he fell in love with Laurie, then just gradually becoming more and more mad until he just dies. It's fucking great. I love his character. It's one of the greatest characters in TV in general. I love it. Season 3 kind of gets into different territory. It's like when the people of The Walking Dead try to cope with the fact that they can just live peacefully in some place. They will always be hunted by some other people. Will always be the threat of zombies. So they kind of have to build a community. And so the whole conflict of the season is to try to build something new in the prison. The prison storyline is one of my favorite storylines ever, especially in relation to the war against Woodbury. I loved all of that. Like beginning season 3 until half of season 4 is such a great part of the whole show. It introduced great new characters like the governor. It introduced like Tyrese and Sasha, which were also characters that are very important later on. And I have like so little to say about it because it's just perfectly written drama for a TV show. To me, season 3 is just perfect. Season 4 continues that on, I think, until the halfway point of season 4. That whole storyline, that whole prison storyline. I'm just glad how it ended at that point. Not because I wanted like people like Herschel to die, but I think story-wise it's just perfectly written. And everything that is after that is also so completely different from what we've seen by now, because we are very used to our characters having like one place to go always. Either it was in season 2 the farm, or in season 3 it was always the prison. But now at this point they've lost everything, and now they're just all scattered around. And that part of season 4 is just so incredibly great. Just 8 episodes of these people trying to deal with the fact that their home is just completely destroyed, and they now have to just find some place. And they all end up at one place in the end, which is one of my favorite scenes where they are actually reunite. I love when they reunite in Terminal. It's like such a deserved moment, because you've been waiting 8 episodes for all of these characters that you have grown to love. And they've all gone through so much shit. Bob, for example, dealing with everything he does in the whole show. Like, for example, Sasha and Maggie and Glenn always getting lost, which was also a big storyline. And Tyrese and Carol, that whole storyline with Lizzie and the other girl. They all went through so much shit at this point, and now finally getting back together in the last moment of season 4 was just great. And it also has the introduction of 3 of the best characters in the whole show, which is Eugene, Abraham, and Rosita. They are some of the most important and some of the best characters in the whole show. And other than most people, I actually liked Eugene from the beginning, just because I enjoyed his presence so much, even though he was kind of a douchebag. But these 3 are so iconic. I love them. Season 5 was also pretty great, since at this point they have been everybody has been through so much shit. It's just like, okay, we're done now. We are done bullshitting us. We just try to survive. When that iconic moment was in the church with Gareth and his last people being slaughtered, what a great moment. What an amazing moment, because Rick doesn't try to bullshit anyone. He realizes that at this point everything is lost and they are just not having it. Gareth still tries to talk himself out of the situation, and it just doesn't work. He's dead. And one of the greatest moments definitely of that season is when they are all killed in the church. Then there's also this whole storyline in the hospital, which in my opinion is not a bad storyline. With Beth trying to grow as a character, trying to get more involved with different things going on, trying not to be like a bystander to everything, until they had this episode where she died. It's not bad that happened, in my opinion. I think the death is pretty sad, especially the moment when Maggie realizes that her sister, that she has been looking for half a season, is just dead now. It's one of the most tragic moments, and I think the first time that I really, really cried to The Walking Dead. But yeah, this whole storyline would be okay if they didn't waste it so much, because the one character who survived the whole situation was Noah, and yeah, they just killed him like in the same season, I think. If you have the guts to kill Beth after a storyline that made her so important, you kind of have to get something out of it at least. And killing Noah was just a bad decision for that. But yeah, in the same season they also introduced Alexandria, which is obviously iconic. It's still a place that exists in The Walking Dead at this point. So Alexandria, great. I loved all the new characters. The leader of Alexandria, I kind of thought Spencer was a pretty interesting character. Jesse as well. Also Aaron, who was great at the beginning. To be honest, I just loved how the whole storyline with Alexandria began, because of how skeptical they are. Because at this point they've lost everything. Everything they've got, they've lost. And so finding a new place that actually feels like something that happened before the apocalypse is just surreal for them. And kind of seeing our characters who have lived on the street for so long actually find a new place, that is a pretty sweet moment, but also scary, because the first place that felt like before the apocalypse was Woodbury, and that was obviously not a good place. Now, many people weren't happy with how the show was going from season 6 until season 8. A lot of people stopped watching at that point. It was when Scott Gimple started being the showrunner for The Walking Dead, so he kind of changed a lot. It was the whole war with the Saviors that was going on. It kind of took away the aspect of zombies being a threat and had it more just being people being a threat. And it added Hilltop, it added the Kingdom, it added the Saviors. There was a lot going into this story that was new, but also kind of stupid, because if you think about it, at this point it kind of feels like they were running out of ideas, because okay, what can we add? A king with dreadlocks who is very weird with his language and who has a tiger. Okay, then they have another leader of another community who has a baseball bat with razor blades on it. Also pretty interesting. Then we have a community of people who live in a junkyard and who also talk very weirdly. And it just kind of feels like at this point they've run out of ideas that are plausible, so they just make up anything. But I think it still worked pretty well. Like, I loved the scavengers in a way, especially that moment where they all get killed by Simon, who was one of the greatest characters in the whole show, in my opinion, and one of the greatest antagonists. He was, at least, I think he was a better antagonist than, for example, Philip. But yeah, at this point, many people were unhappy with how the story was going. I thought, to be honest, even though a lot of people were, for example, leaving after Glenn and Abraham were killed, to me, this was still like a great period of the show. I don't think it was bad at all. I am not happy with Glenn dying, but obviously, like, you kind of cannot prevent that. The Walking Dead at that point has like a reputation of just killing off anyone for no reason at all, and people were not happy with that. But right now, looking back on it, I kind of think it's fine that they were just killing anybody they wanted, because that's kind of why this show was still so exciting. Even though they were repeating a lot of things that were done before several times in the show, it's still exciting because you are still rooting for all of your favorite characters. And when random people just die, you kind of feel like your main characters are never in danger, and you kind of want to always keep on watching because you just want them to stay safe. And I think even though a lot of people have died during that period of The Walking Dead, I still think that's not a bad thing, because it added a lot of danger to the show. Now on to season 9, that was when Scott Gimple was not the showrunner anymore, which a lot of people were happy about. That was also when Angela Kang started to be the showrunner for The Walking Dead, which changed a lot. I think season 9 is completely different from anything they did in season 8. At this point, the show kind of feels very peaceful and in a way very medieval, because they at this point don't have any technology anymore, and they can't use weapons anymore because they don't have ammunition, and so it kind of feels very different. And it's a very interesting look on how the world would look after so much time has passed. Yeah, I think season 9 is one of the best seasons of the whole show. Specific storylines in season 9 just work so perfectly. I think just in the way that season 3 is a perfectly written drama, also season 9 is a perfectly written drama. Like, everything is so incredibly well done. Every character is built up so good. Deaths are very important in a way for the show. It's still happening that a lot of random deaths just happen, especially in episode 15, which was one of the most devastating episodes ever. But they kind of felt like they still had a purpose, which I still liked. They killed off a lot of people. They killed off Gregory, which, for example, was a great episode. They just killed him off in episode 1. It's very risky, but it worked, which I really liked about that show. I think season 9 tried a lot of different things at this point. We were very used to a lot of things at this point in The Walking Dead, but they changed it up a lot in season 9, and it worked. It worked very well. I loved season 9. The main thing that I don't like about season 9 is how they just threw away Maggie. I'm not like angry about her leaving the show at this point. I mean, obviously she comes back, but she would have left for good. The actress of Maggie wanted to leave because she had different projects that she wanted to focus on, but because that didn't work out, she came back to The Walking Dead later on. But if it worked out, she would have left for good. And the ending of Maggie at that point is just like, if they actually ended Maggie's storyline at that point, that would be sad. It would be a bad ending. Her just leaving after the 5th episode was just not good. At least not in the way they did it, because they didn't say goodbye at all. It was just not an ending for an important character like this. But yeah, I just think season 9 of the show is one of the best seasons. But then season 10 came around. I never really understood the hate that a lot of people had for the show. I mean, I understood it, but I didn't share it. A lot of people were unhappy with, for example, killing of Glenn, because Glenn was a great character and his death felt very wasted. And in my opinion, I said it already, it still worked for me. So I wasn't really getting why people were so mad about it, because that's just how the show works. But with season 10, I started getting a little frustrated with the show as well. Which I hated, because I really wanted to like the show, but it just started becoming a little mixed. The first third of the show was great still. They were still fighting the Whisperers. The whole storyline with them killing the Whisperers is just pretty great. I mean, they did a good job with that. The second third of the season was weird. I can't even describe it, but a lot of things about that part of the show just felt off. It just didn't work as well. It wasn't as exciting. You didn't really feel the danger at this point, in a way, which is kind of sad. But like I said, up until season 8 and 9, they just killed off anyone because they can. And they stopped doing that in season 10 a bit. And I don't like that. They started just killing people if it would fit for the story, which in a way should be better. But two things I don't like up until season 10 was, first of all, even when a person's storyline would be done and they don't really have anything to offer anymore, they didn't kill them off. For example, Gabriel. I don't think Gabriel is that exciting of a character at this point anymore. He's a badass. I love watching him. But Gabriel and Aaron and Rosita, a lot of these characters who have been there for a very long time, just don't change anymore. They don't have anything more to offer because every bit of potential has been used. So at this point, they're just there because they are main characters, but they don't really do anything anymore. And just killing one of them off would have been important to me, to kind of keep it exciting, because you can still die at any point. I mean, they killed Carl. They killed Carl, but they didn't kill Gabriel, for example, which is so baffling to me. That's why the second third of season 10 just got a little bit less interesting because it just felt way too safe at this point. And the last third of season 10 was, I don't want to say what it was bad, but it was bad. For a show like this to have 8 episodes of just basically nothing was bad. The Negan episode is a good episode. They did it before, that they just used a whole episode to kind of explain the backstory of a character in the show. They did it in season 6 with Morgan's character, and I loved that episode. I cried to it because I loved Eastman as a character. So them having that episode, Negan, I think it just was called Negan, it was great. I liked the episode. It was good. But the other 7 episodes could have been done in the runtime of just 2 episodes. But they stretched it out to 7. And I don't know why. I don't know why you make the decision to make a longer season. But then you just decide to not fill it with anything interesting at all. I mean, it's not like it didn't progress the plot, but it progressed the plot so little that it wasn't worth using 7 episodes of. I really disliked the last third of season 10. And that's why I also was very skeptical about season 11 when it started. Because at this point, like, having watched so many episodes when nothing is happening, when things finally start happening, it just wasn't as exciting at this point, because I've just lost interest. I mean, the season 11 started getting more and more into it when they killed Pope, when Leah got to be an antagonist. I think when they started the second third of season 11, that's when the show kind of started getting into it a bit more. Because the first third, again, they had like no main character really die, except for Alden, but at this point they also didn't care about Alden anymore because they just left him for 3 episodes, forgot about him, and then when we finally found out he was dead, oh, what a surprise. Yeah, I really thought the first third of season 11 was just not exciting at this point. There was no danger to it anymore, which is kind of sad. And in the second third, I think it got better, obviously with the Commonwealth starting to get more and more introduced. I wasn't really bored with the Commonwealth. I think it was an interesting place, even though it was basically a rehash of a lot of different things that already happened in The Walking Dead. I think because I knew it was ending at this point, it really worked still. I think it was still pretty interesting. But then we got the final episodes, and I just watched 6 episodes in one piece yesterday. The last 6 episodes, so it's still kind of fresh, but I think the last third of season 11 was just not as good anymore. Well, not really bad, but just, like I said, not as interesting. First of all, the danger was definitely gone. The only main characters that died in the season at this point were, I think, Lance and the son of Pamela. Like I said, Alden, but he just wasn't interesting at this point anymore. And in the end, also Leah died, and in the end, Rosita died. But to be honest, I don't want people to die, obviously. At this point, I've grown so comfortable with most of the main characters in the show, that I obviously want them to survive. But only having bad guys die at this point doesn't feel realistic. And when they actually decide to kill off characters, it's the most boring thing, not because I didn't care about the characters, but because they just didn't feel important. At this point, I would want a death that means something, for example, when Negan was threatened to be killed, and then his wife was threatened to be killed. I actually thought, if that would happen now, if they actually killed Negan and his wife, as brutal as it would be, and as much as I would hate it, because I love Negan as a character, it would mean something. It would be interesting, and it would still mean that there's danger. But the only people they actually kill were Luke and Jules. Why? They just brought them back to kill them off, which was pretty stupid as a decision. And at this point, I just don't care about them anymore. Why would I care if you kill Luke and Jules? And I feel like the last few episodes kind of spend a lot of time with things that are just not as important. They are still trying to survive in a horde. of zombies. There's like one scene where they are separated and they kind of want to all get into a trailer. And when they get separated, it's like, oh no, they are in danger. They're not in danger. They've been doing this for 2 seasons now. We just know that they will not die. It's not dangerous anymore. And then it's like it's like a big plot point all of a sudden that Lydia got bit. I feel like just at this point it shouldn't be the story shouldn't be about surviving the zombies. It should be about something a bit more consequential to the whole story, because trying to survive a horde of zombies is something we've seen so many times now at this point. And if the only deaths of our protagonists are from zombie bites, at this point I just don't feel that is earned anymore. Rosita's death especially. I feel like if we have a main character die, it shouldn't be at the end just so we have a tragic moment. If Negan died at the point that I mentioned, that would be a death that means something. If Gabriel died at the point that I mentioned before, that would mean something. But if you have a death at the end of Rosita just because she got bit, her character didn't really do anything emotionally at this point anymore. She just was there for the whole time, and then in the last episode she gets bit and dies. It doesn't work. It doesn't have an effect anymore. I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. And then there's also the part that I genuinely don't feel like the show ended very well. I know that the comics have a pretty bold ending. In the very last chapter they skip like 20 years ahead and they just show how the apocalypse is at this point, and it's like normal. It's just normal. But in the show they still spend like 40 minutes in the last episode just trying to survive a horde of zombies and mourning for Rosita and Luke, which again at this point it shouldn't be like a problem anymore. And then they spend like the last 10 minutes in a flash forward to look at, to have like a very hopeful sequence about, oh, that this is how it is now, this is nice, fine. Not really a good ending to me. I'm kind of disappointed in that, because at this point we have waited 11 seasons to get like a conclusion, and at this point we know that a lot of things can change in like a very short time. The flash forward in season 9 was about 5 years, and so after 5 years things still went to shit again. And in the last episode we have a flash forward of 1 year. And I feel like if you had a flash forward of, I don't know, 20 years, you would see that 11 seasons of fighting for a new life and fighting for a chance to survive has meant something. But just flashing forward 1 year doesn't really show that things have changed permanently. Because things can still change like very quickly. It doesn't feel like an ending because we have waited 11 seasons for things to get better. But it just basically looks the same as when Alexandria was at its high point, and when Hilltop was at its high point, and the Kingdom and the Commonwealth. It just doesn't feel like like it's any different. But having a happy ending for The Walking Dead should feel like a more permanent ending. But the fact that it's just 1 year forward, it doesn't feel like this is a permanent thing. It just didn't really close things off enough. If they did it like in the comics, just 20 years later, that would work a lot better, because you feel like, okay, at this point, after 20 years, if it's still good at this point, well, then it probably has worked. Then probably everything was worth it. I just don't feel like this was a very satisfying ending. Also because they are still announcing like 2 more shows. One with Negan and Maggie, which I'm not really hyped about because their conflict has solved in the last episode. And one with Rick and Michonne, which I'm also not really happy about, because at this point they have left the show, and them getting a teaser for their own show in the last episode of an 11 season show is pretty unfulfilling. After 11 seasons, you still don't feel like the story is over. And that's just kind of disappointing. They just didn't really close it off enough. So what are my thoughts on The Walking Dead in general? I still think it's a great show. It has some of the best moments in TV history, I think. It's an incredibly well-written, well-acted show. Super exciting, a lot of tension, a lot of brutality, a lot of great characters. I love a lot of different things about The Walking Dead. But I don't think it has ended as well as I would want it to be, because the story builds up to something that is like a hopeful ending, but the way they ended it wasn't really hopeful. And the way they built up the last episodes to it were very tensionless and not as exciting anymore, which is kind of sad. But those are my thoughts on The Walking Dead. We'll see what I watch next.